So the beauty about Blood Origins is that we are open to massive conversations with varying degrees of people all around the world. You are certainly one of those characters that do not firmly fit in the space of typically who Blood Origins talks to, Khory.
Yeah, I can completely understand that, but hopefully I can give some good context and value to your listeners as we go on.
So before we go on, and this will determine if a podcast moves forward or not, Springboks or Wallabies? Springboks, right?
Well, obviously, I've got to choose my words carefully. No, what Wallabies? I can tell from your accent. Then you're from South Africa, is it?
South Africa with a 20-year Mississippi accent layered on top of it.
Right. Okay. Yeah. What made you move to Australia then?
Not in Australia. I moved to Mississippi to move to America, and
But
I
you've spent some
came here.
time over here, right?
Yeah, it's the dark side of my family. We don't like to talk about it. That's my
Yeah.
mother's side of the
Okay.
family. You know, the whole family is
Ah.
Australian. Half of me is Australian. We don't like to talk about that side of the family.
Okay,
You know?
okay, all right. No, well, there's going to be some conflict there, but no, I'm definitely a Wallabies fan. Not the last World Cup, but hopefully we can rebuild.
Well, you got a young team, and a young team needs time to mature. So,
That's very true. Yes.
well, Khory Hancock, welcome to the Blood Origins podcast. As I set the stage, you are certainly not our typical guest. Explain what your role is right now. What do you do right now as a job?
I'm an environmental scientist. I built my own carbon project developer company, which means that I go around to cattle stations primarily and introduce regenerative agriculture type methods to regenerate carbon in the soils and the forests and improve water quality and improve biodiversity levels, all that kind of good stuff by managing livestock more effectively and the fire management, weed management, pest management, all that kind of stuff. We put a plan into place to manage all these land, water aspects more effectively, and we accrue carbon credits. And then we can trade those carbon credits on the market for a profit over a 25, 100-year period, as you know, generally as people seeking offsets. However, it's becoming a lot more marketable than that. It's becoming more of an investment opportunity for investors. They actively trade the credits. Yeah, and it's so that's primarily what I do. I've got 10 cattle stations at the moment across Australia, and I just go around to them.
How many hectares have you got enrolled?
Yeah, it's about 500,000, 500,000 hectares. Other companies have got millions and millions. It's actually part of Australia's, or the world's at the moment, the largest land restoration project in history. So I'm very proud and privileged, I would say, to be a part of that and actively contributing to regenerating our world's forests and soils.
So tell me a little bit more, because what do we do? What's happening right now in your typical cattle station scenario, agricultural scenario, that you are changing from a regenerative perspective?
Yeah, so they are conventionally minded cattle graziers primarily across Australia.
What does that mean? What does that mean?
Yeah, specifically, it means that they extract more than what they put back into the land. So they're overgrazing. They're not utilizing their country very effectively. They're not managing fire very effectively. They're deteriorating and suppressing forests. So, you know, forests generally want in good rainfall areas, if there's not drought, etc., they want to regenerate, right? These cattle and sheep and goats, they come along and they suppress that forest by eating the trees, by overgrazing, so that regeneration doesn't get a chance to get up. Basically, I come along and I say, manage your cattle more effectively, put water points in, put extra fencing in to be able to rotationally graze, plan graze, manage the fire more effectively, make sure these areas are well rested, well recovered, move your cattle on, and allow those areas to regenerate. And that's where your carbon accrual comes from.
Obviously, growing a forest is sort of antithetical to grazing. Because when a forest, it has to be. You're growing this canopy forest that has no grass underneath it.
This is the misconception, and it's the argument that a lot of podcasters, not yourself, I mean, a lot of plant-based podcasters have. They say, "Oh, well, it's cattle. You can't run cattle and these carbon projects." It's like, absolutely, you can. First of all, there's a lot of evidence, scientific evidence from CSIRO, Australia's leading scientific agency, that says that the optimal soil carbon and pasture growth is with forests, and about 20 to 40% canopy, which is what we aim for as well, a 20-40% canopy, which is open forest. It's not thick. You don't want to lead to woody thickening, which does decrease pasture growth, but you absolutely, for longevity, I'm talking about longevity, decades to come, is it actually puts soil carbon and nutrients back into the ground by having forests, by having trees there, and you can manage cattle sustainably in between. What we're doing in Australia right now is we're clearing large amounts of land for a short-term pasture growth. Yes, you may get a big pasture biomass grass growth hit, which gives you a short-term profit gain from extra cattle that you can graze, but it's not putting anything back into the country, right? It's not putting that soil and the nutrients back into the country. Trees can do that better than any other plant material in the entire world, in that sense. Like, people think they can do it with just pasture and good grass species. You can't. You can do that with about 30 centimetre. You can increase the nutrient level and the soil carbon in about 30 centimetres with just grasses. But trees will send it deeper, right? And deeper is what matters. It increases the substructure of the soil. So that's the first point, is that's absolute misconception.
Do you have a basal area of trees that you're aiming for?
Yeah, 20 to 40% overall forest cover, canopy cover, is what we aim for over a 25-year period. So we have 25 years to hit that forest canopy cover. That's the optimal grazing slash carbon project, is that we can graze openly with a sustainable amount of cattle through that area. But we can also run a successful carbon project that's compliant with the regulations in Australia. Now, I want to bring it to the second point, though, is that we would not be able to complete these projects long term without cattle. And the reason why I say that is because fire is a huge risk to these carbon projects. Over like a 10-year period,
could see that. That would be massive, right? You have one big devastating fire, shit, your carbon project's gone.
It's all gone. All the trees, like, it gets into the trees and the canopy cover, especially with the increased climate change and the increased, droughts that we're having in Australia. It's extremely flammable. We actually have to reduce that fire load to be able to reduce the fire intensity. There are a number of scientific studies that have been done around that actually do suggest that if you manage cattle in a regenerative manner, you can successfully reduce that fire intensity overall, which increases your ability to be able to control burns, do these cool burns along with it, which Australia has regenerated over the last 60,000 years with Aboriginal culture. They used to use fire to manage country for that way. And so the landscape has adapted to fire. We actually have to include fire in these projects, but controlled fires. At the moment, they're all uncontrolled burns, and it wipes out the forests, and that wipes out not only my income, but the landholder income, all the effort that we've put in. So in
your strategy, you're putting in purposely in your strategy, you also have a controlled burn program to maximize and change and create sort of heterogeneous mosaics of different pastures mixed in with your rotational grazing of your cattle systems.
Yes, we use cattle as a tool to reduce fire intensity. that we are in the business of long-term forest growth, and we're like, these are 25-year projects. It's a long time, 25-year carbon permanence period. So when you think about that, and you think about national parks, not only Australia but across the world, that don't have livestock in them, and all national parks are now burning. They're all going up in smoke, right? And we got to look at why that is. It's because number one, they're not managing the vegetation effectively for fire, and number two, there's way too much fuel load there. It's way too explosive. And so cattle can actually be an effective tool to reduce that. Like, I am in the business of longevity, not a short-term gain. I am in the business of long-term forest growth and making sure that those forests stay there. And one way to do that, well, there's two ways to do that. The first way is to use cattle effectively in a regenerative manner to reduce that fuel load. The second way is to do these controlled cooler burns, as Australia's landscape has adapted to fire, and a lot of plant species actually become resilient and need fire to be able to reseed, to be able to germinate properly. So yeah, that's exactly what we try and achieve with the carbon projects.
Khory, why do you think the national park system in Australia has moved away from a fire program, a burn program, a forest management, forest stand improvement kind of strategy?
They still do. However, it's not effective. They don't see the long-term sort of risk. So these forests build up, and then there's a massive fire every 10 years. Climate change is worsening this, it's making vegetation more brittle by drying it out with increased temperatures and the droughts, less rainfall, that kind of thing. So the first reason why, to answer your question directly, is funding. They just don't have the funding to manage the millions of hectares of land that they've got locked up. The second reason is safety. It's actually like the window, because of climate change, the window to burn is becoming less and less and less. You've only got a very small window these days where it's actually safe to burn. Otherwise, it's been too hot, too dry, and they get too worried about burning because we've got infrastructure across Australia now.
But you've also got a vegetation system that is, I'll say volatile, and I say volatile specifically because of all of the sort of resins, and you've got eucalypt forests that are just like, it's the thing that burns the most, burns the hottest kind of scenario. So when you guys have burns, when you guys have fires in Australia, it is most times, when it gets out of control, absolutely devastating. I was caught in, I don't know if I was 14 or 15 years old. My brother, no, it couldn't have been. We were much older because I was driving, 18, 19, and we drove into Canberra at like 2:00 in the afternoon, and a big fire was rolling, and it was one of the big fires that devastated Canberra. Big fireballs came out of off the hillsides and just landed on people's houses. And Khory, at 3:00 in the afternoon, the entire sky turned red. It was like we had a cloud over us, and it was red. We were on the roof, hosing down the roof, pulling stuff out of the gutters. It was 3:00, and I get goosebumps today thinking about it. It was like the apocalypse.
It's our number one risk, not only in the carbon projects themselves, but I would say the entire world right now. No one really knows how to manage fire effectively, and we need to find out how to do it. We need to find out how to do it very quickly. One of those ways that we do is we get traditional owners, Aboriginal people that have that cultural knowledge back on the land to understand better how they used to do it and how we might be able to combine the best of Western science with those more traditional Indigenous practices. So that's one way, but it is changing fast. The climate's changing fast in a way that we can't really adapt. So we're all learning. It's a learning process about fire and how to manage it more effectively. But yeah, there's two main methods: reduce the fuel load, and then get these controlled burns in place as well. So yeah, it's a huge risk, not only in Australia but across the world. It's probably our number one risk, I'd say, to forest permanence.
Are you finding that traditional people's knowledge base is still there, or have we lost it already?
Lost a lot. I would say lost a lot. There's a guy in Australia called Victor Stephenson. He comes from a traditional Aboriginal background up in the Cape York, North Queensland area. He's written a book called Fire Country. It's actually really good. It talks about a lot of traditional practices that he used, and it doesn't quite fit into Western science. So Western science is very methodical. We like to put squares around things and time periods. So say we're going to burn this block at this time, this block at this time. It's all planned. It's all staged. He talks more about going into country and feeling the moisture on the ground, looking at where it might burn and when, and then it's all about timing from there. So he'll just go into country and say, okay, this patch needs burning now. It's the right time. It's moist. The ground's good. The wind's good. We're going to burn it now. And he'll light a match there, and he knows where it'll go out. It'll go out this river here. It won't cross the river because it's too wet over in this patch. He talks about reading country. That is very difficult to do in the fast-paced business world that we run right now. So we need people with that kind of knowledge base, and we need to train people in reading country. I would say we need to be ecologically literate. At the moment, we're theoretically or academically literate. We know what the science says on paper. We know what this, and that. It doesn't often happen that way. And reading countries is what they were very, very good at. And it's and that knowledge can't necessarily be transferred from one person to another. You have to have experience on the ground doing it. You actually have to go out in the paddock and go, okay, I see what he's saying there. I see this, I see that bit, and read it for yourself. So we've lost a lot of that in general. Academic science tends to just look at peer-reviewed papers and sit behind a computer desk all day, and they'll criticize anyone that says otherwise. Whereas that wasn't the way that Aboriginals managed the land for 60,000 years. That they would actually be able to, go on country and look at a plant, look at an animal, and say and know what that animal or that plant is going to do if they do this X, Y, and Z. It was a different way of seeing and interconnecting humans with nature itself. We have separated ourselves somewhat from nature, and we have to get somewhat back to that interconnectedness that they once had. I don't have the answers, but I do know the theory and the general principles behind some of these management practices. And basically, we just need to train young people. We need to train young people back on the land in these practices so that they're not just trained from a university academic standpoint. They actually know how to manage country on the ground. I think that's part of the answer, and the other part of the answer is just listening to people, growing as much as you can, and don't be afraid to make mistakes. Like these carbon projects, they're new, they're long term. We're going to make mistakes, but we're going to work out how to fix them. And working out how to fix them means gaining many different perspectives from many different angles, from the landholder, from the government regulator, the compliance side, from scientists, and from Indigenous people. So, it's a collective sort of, I take a very collective view with my carbon projects. I like to gain a lot of different perspectives and get a lot of different people working on the same thing with a common goal of regeneration and agricultural productivity. I don't separate the two. I try and get both in together because we need food. We need growth in the agricultural space, but we also need growth in regeneration because that's our climate change mitigation.
Yeah, actually makes, for sure.
Yeah, it makes the land more resilient, all types of stuff. So those two go hand in hand.
Have you heard of Alan Savory?
Yes, yeah, I've spoken with him a few times. I've missed out on interviewing him, but yeah, he was sort of, where all this concept of holistic management and regenerative grazing kind of started. So his TED talk is just, it's mind blowing in that sense, and it caused a lot of controversy. But yeah, it was good. It was a good start.
It is controversial. Super concentrated cattle into super small areas and rotationally move them, and you're improving grass, you're reducing erosion, you're improving soil nutrients. It was, again, a revolutionary thought process to what you should be doing, in the field. And now technology. Think about technology. Like we have I was on a hunt that had cattle on the property, and they were using now, instead of electric paddocks, they were putting collars. It was almost like an e-collar for dogs, and the
Yep.
cows had an e-collar, and it was all driven by an iPad kind of scenario. And they literally drew an electric fence virtually around the cows, and the cows got electrocuted.
Yeah, if they cross it. Yeah.
Yeah,
No,
and
technology is really moving very quickly, I'd say. The Alan Savory technique is what we sort of use, or some of those sort of more regenerative, holistic methods. But the concept is mimicking nature, right? These millions of bison in the American northern
right.
plains, they used to move around because of that predator prey type model that has been throughout millions of years of history. There's always been predators, there's always been prey. The predators will go and stalk the prey, and the prey will usually be in huge herds, and they will be bunched in together to protect themselves in those huge herds. So that's the intense grazing. But they were moved on because they were chased by these predators. So it's intense grazing for short periods of time. Now, what that does is it tramples the ground, it stimulates seed growth, it puts the nutrients from the plants back into the soil, it leaves about a third of the plant for that photosynthesis process to occur, to allow for regeneration, and they've moved on. Very quickly. So it allows for that rest and recovery period. So everything that we're doing is mimicking what has happened for millions of years, from the dinosaurs to the bison to the elephants and the giraffes in Africa. We are looking to mimic nature and work in with nature. Everything that we've done in conventional agriculture has gone against that. It's been that block mindset. Put a heap of cattle in one paddock, and they're going to stay there all year. And what that does is that just degenerates the soil and the plants right down to the ground. So it doesn't get a chance to rest or recover or regenerate. Right? That is not the way that the entire world established forests across and mitigated climate change. Like kept the world in an equal balanced temperature for millions and millions of years. Animals actually played a crucial part in climate balance across the last million years. Or, the last 60 million years or so since the dinosaurs got wiped out. They have created an incredible balanced ecosystem that has gone up and down over the years. But as soon as we've come in, we put excess carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, and we've put fences in everywhere, and we've stopped that sort of natural migration, those natural patterns. We need to go back. We need to convert our entire agricultural system into those more regenerative systems that aim to mimic and regenerate nature. That's the entire aim of the carbon projects. It's a way to regulate that, right? Because you don't know how to, a lot of it's greenwashing. They say that they're regenerative farmers, but they're not unless it gets monitored and regulated and you're actually accruing the carbon. So we apply the science back on that model. So there is no greenwashing about it. If you don't accrue the carbon, if you're not increasing biodiversity, then you don't actually get paid. All this stuff gets third-party audited, it's government regulated. There's a lot of scientists involved with it, and we monitor that every year. So we actually don't get paid if we're not accruing carbon. So everything that I'm doing, like I'm about economic prosperity and profitability, but it's based on regeneration. I have a financial incentive to regenerate, and so does the landholder. So all these cattle grazers, they have a financial incentive to regenerate that land. And if they don't get paid. And there's millions of dollars in this right now. The market is going crazy. So because of the climate neutral and the carbon neutral kind of goals that we've got across the world right now, it's really driving that carbon credit price, which in turn is driving regeneration. I think it's an amazing concept because it's flipping that model, that economic model that we've based the entire economy on for the last couple of hundred years, which is we've based the economy on the degeneration of nature. Like we're extracting out of nature. We're cutting down the trees. We're mining fossil fuels out of the ground. We're destroying rivers and everything. And that's been to our we've built incredible cities and incredible technology by doing that, but you can't do that forever. That's not longevity. We've got to a point now where we have to give back, but we can only do that with a good economy. And so this model is basing it on regeneration. It's growing forests. That saying, money doesn't grow on trees. Now it does. And that's exactly what we're doing. Exactly. It's the concept that I need to drill into people's minds, is that money does grow on trees now, and it's a good thing. We're basing the economy not on the degeneration of nature, but the regeneration. It's flipping the model, but we're still making incredible amounts of money off it, which is amazing because that's going to be scalable. Now, people criticize me for saying that, like, you can't make money off nature. Like, yes, you can, because we're going to be able to scale it at the speed and the size that we need to counteract the climate shift, what's coming. So that's why I find this industry so exciting. I just think it is the solution. Along with renewable energy, these carbon projects are the solution.
It's interesting. You talk about fire, the elders, and the feel of the land and whatnot. I remember when I was a graduate student, there was a new sort of thought process around fire called patch mosaic burning. There was this guy called Bruce Brockett back in South Africa. And Bruce, I listened to a talk of his, and he boiled it down super simply. He's like, our model really comes down to, we randomly pick out of a hat what day of the year, we pick randomly what month of the year, we randomly pick out how many matches we're going to drop, and we randomly pick where we're going to drop them. And we go and we drop them. And then we do it again, and we do it again, and we do it again, and we do it again. And what he was illustrating was this quilt-like landscape of patch mosaic burning, in which you've got areas that have just burned next to areas that haven't burnt in 10 years kind of scenario. And so you've got this fuel load and this change in the ecosystem that is more manageable for fires. It's probably a more healthy kind of return on the ecosystem. So it was just interesting when you was talking about the feel of it, because it just reminded me of Bruce and this thought process around patch mosaics. Khory, one of the things... Go ahead.
No, I was just going to agree with you. That's exactly what they used to do. And that's what converting yourself from that conventional agriculture into regenerative agriculture, it's a mindset shift. You have to think about everything differently. You have to remove yourself from the compliance sort of academic world, that mechanical mindset of that block. Here's a square, we're going to fit inside that square. You have to remove yourself from that and think more like nature. And the only way to do that is to spend time in nature, and exactly what you said, like go and read country and look at different ways in that you can work in with it, not against it. And think of yourself as humans as a part of it, and not separate to it. It's a completely different mindset, and that's probably the psychological part of regeneration is probably the single biggest challenge that we have right now in converting people from conventional into regenerative. But that's why the financial carbon credit system sort of helps. It helps convert people a lot quicker.
Do you find that people are reluctant? Because I could see this, and I'll then, for the first time, I'll bring almost a hunting reference into it. That people are like, wow, I don't want to do this carbon project because you're going to get rid of the thing that we do right now on the land, i.e. cattle, i.e. I know that there's some people that hunt buffalo in the Northern Territory that may not hunt buffalo anymore because of potential carbon projects coming down the pipeline.
No. See, we include feral animal management into it. So I do quarterly monitoring on these projects, and I actually ask for all the feral pigs, the cats that they catch and hunt, everything feral. Buffaloes are considered feral, so they don't change their practices, they improve them. If they're catching 10 pigs a month, I'm saying you need to go and do a helicopter shoot and get 500. That's the aim with these carbon projects. Actually, we will increase the amount of hunting. Feral pigs in Australia, they're actually really clever and cunning, so that you need a lot of different methods. If you're not going to use a helicopter shoot, which is probably the most effective, you need a lot of different methods on the ground, trapping, and some of the clever boars have dodged those traps for ages, so you need poison baits or good dogs to go out and get them. we implement, like we look at the best strategy for that area, and then we tell the landowners that that's what you've committed to in this carbon project. You actually have to go and do that. So rather than them just going for a fun hunt every now and again, it becomes part of their job. Like if they're not doing that, then they risk not getting the carbon money as well. So it's a further incentive to do what they are already doing, but maybe not doing enough of. So and with the whole cattle grazing thing, like I don't do the whole destocking thing unless it's really needed to, unless they're fully overgrazing, with 20,000 head of cattle in a few hectares where they actually have to destock for a period of time. Most of them aren't utilizing their land effectively enough because they haven't had the financial resources to allow themselves to. So, for example, cattle graze within a 2 to 3 kilometre surface of each watering point. So one of the strategies, the regenerative strategies, is to put more water points in to allow the cattle to graze, to spread their grazing more effectively. So you're actually utilizing more of your land. Most of the time, the grazier is only using utilizing 50% of their land. So you don't actually need to decrease cattle numbers. Effectively, you can increase cattle numbers if you put these regenerative strategies in place. It's just utilizing your land more effectively, which is reducing the overall fuel load more effectively. So it's reducing that fire intensity. So you reduce the risk. I'm in the risk management business. So I look at the risks of feral cats, feral pigs, fire, all these different things that can affect the regeneration. And then I put a plan in place to do that. And realistically, and this is my aim with carbon projects, is that by improving infrastructure, by putting more fence to manage your cattle more effectively, splitting paddocks, by putting in more water points, you'll actually improve the value of your property overall. That's been one of the other arguments in Australia is they say, I put a carbon project on and you won't be able to resell. Your resale value will be a lot higher, and it's proven to be so. People are putting a premium on their cattle properties when they go to sell them because of the carbon project, because they've had the money to put in more fences, more watering points, improve the infrastructure, improve the grazing management on the property, put all these plans in place. So when someone else steps into it, all these plans are already in place, all the infrastructure is in place. All they have to do is manage the cattle the way that they should be managed anyway. So this stuff is there's been so many pub rumors that I've had to counteract over the years of this because people just don't understand it. It is highly complex, but at the same time, it's simple. What we're doing is just getting the landholders to commit to a regenerative plan that should work in with their business model anyway, and it should improve the property value, and everyone gets a win-win out of it. You improve agricultural productivity on the place, at the same time you improve the property value, and we all get the regeneration, which is the carbon credits. And it's a huge financial incentive to get carbon credits. Like some of these properties are, the projections for the carbon credits are sort of 500 million over 25 years. And the model that I use is I split that. So I'll take, 25% of that over a 25-year period, and the landholder gets the rest in the pocket. Whatever carbon you accrue is what you get for that year. So the tree growth is based on tree growth and soil carbon health. So if your methods are working, you're accruing that carbon, the trees are growing, then you get that growth that year, annual growth period.
Khory, that sounds like, could a farmer go sort of on the opposite side of that and say, well, screw this, I'm going to get rid of all my cattle, I'm going to plant as much trees as I possibly can?
They can, yeah, absolutely. If they wanted to do that, they can. There's an integrated method coming up into play, which includes tree planting. You can stack methods now, so you can do so before you could only choose one method. You can only choose tree planting or soil, but now they're allowing smaller properties to get in on this. Generally speaking, it's been large scale properties. For example, my smallest property is about 30,000 hectares. But now it doesn't give a chance for the smaller properties to come into play. So now they're allowing to stack methods. You can do soil carbon, you can do tree planting, you can do human-induced regeneration, you can do beef herd methane reduction emissions management. You can stack all these methods, which adds to your carbon credit pool, which makes this more economically viable for the smaller guys. So yeah, it's becoming more feasible for some people, but also uh, yeah, if they wanted to get all your cattle off and just go carbon, they absolutely can. But at some point, like if it depends on the property, but at some point you need to bring those cattle or livestock management back in to reduce that fire intensity. I've been
How?
very yeah,
Keep going. Sorry.
I've just been that's right. I've just been very big on that. Is that you have to bring agricultural product management back into it, livestock management effectively back into it at some point to manage that fire risk, because otherwise it's too great a risk for the carbon project itself.
Have you
So
seen properties that have? And here's a swing into what I do in hunting. Have you seen properties that have large deer populations in Australia
yes,
operating in the same mechanism as cattle?
yes, but
Or
not so
kangaroos,
much.
right? Kangaroos are huge grazers.
Yeah, that's one of the carbon methods. Or feral animal management methods that we use is to exclusive fencing to make sure that kangaroos are fenced out of areas or managed effectively within the cattle properties. So yeah, roos used to be a massive problem when they built up in huge numbers, but the drought actually sort of corrected that a bit. They're not so big in numbers, so they're not impacting the regeneration so much. But yeah, kangaroos, sheep, and goats all have the same teeth, so they eat the plant right down to the base. Whereas cattle can wrap their tongue around the plant and strip it, which means there's some leaf left, which means there's some regeneration. With goats, kangaroos, and sheep, they don't leave anything. So they're really bad for the environment if you don't manage them effectively. So you got to watch that kind of stuff. Yeah, people think that kangaroos are great. In they are, but not in huge numbers like we're seeing in Australia right now. It's not so bad now, as I was saying, but yeah, it is something that needs to be managed.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I didn't. I should have asked this question right at the beginning. Have you ever hunted, Khory?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't really given my background. I grew up on a cattle station
Okay.
in central Queensland, central Western Queensland, and that's all we did for as a hobby. Like it was my brother and my sister and I out in a cattle station. The nearest kids that we could hang out with were an hour and a half away on the property. So and we went into I was homeschooled, so we saw our classmates probably twice a year. So, I mean, we had to find things to do out there. We're 3 hours from the nearest town, 3 hour drive. And yeah, that's what we did. We used to go pig chasing, shooting roos, debate the traps. That was our fun. I don't do much of it. I don't do any of it anymore. I spearfish occasionally, but I don't really enjoy it. I've got to say, like growing up doing that, it was fun at the time, but that's not. I leave that to the professionals now. I'm not really a good shot to start with. I really enjoy traditional archery, not to shoot or anything, but just like off the back of a horse and horseback archery kind of thing. So I enjoy that side of it. But no, I'm not a hunter as such. I just manage the hunting that goes on the cattle stations.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think you would find if you decided to pick up your trad bow and get involved in hunting through trad bow methods, I think you would absolutely. I don't do it, but the people who do it, it's the thing of things
It's a
because you're
real skill,
becoming.
right?
It's a skill you have to. You're getting in within 10 paces of an animal, 15 paces of an animal, and it doesn't know you're there, and
Mm.
there's no technology. It's just you and your feeling of how you anchor, how the arrow flies. It is like the most back to nature kind of hunting that you can imagine.
Yeah, and so much comes into that, right? Like wind and you have to be so patient. I mean, I stalked a couple of wallabies once, and I was stalking them for a couple of hours before I got anywhere near them. You just have to be so patient and quiet, and yeah. I mean, I did do a lot of it as a kid, and I enjoyed it at the time. But yeah, no, it's not my forte now. I concentrate on the actual livestock and business side of it, I think. Yeah.
Good deal. Yeah, I think it's important. I think one of the most important messages from someone like you is, I think, you know, hunting, hunting as a recreational activity, as a management tool, cattle, raising, grazing, it's not antithetical to what you're trying to do on the landscape.
No, it actually, no, it is everything that we need to do. Everything. If we don't
It's
have hunting,
harmonious.
yeah, it is. If we don't have hunting, then I would say they need to be hunting. If they don't have cattle, and they have a massive bushfire risk on their property, then I say you need to get cattle. Like it works in together. You just need to manage these systems a little bit better than what we currently are, and that requires a bit of a mindset shift. And that's what I train people in, the mindset shift, overlaid with a financial sort of incentive. Yeah, just to give you a stat, like for feral cats, for example, feral cats in Australia, there was a study done by CSIRO, and recently, last couple of years, feral cats kill 1.8 billion native animals per year in Australia. 1.8 billion. That's 2,000 animals per minute. 2,000 per minute. I mean, that's way ahead of climate change. It's way ahead of cattle. It's way ahead of deforestation. If we don't learn how to control cats, then we're going to lose a lot of our native wildlife population, in particular birds. It's a phenomenal impact that we don't talk about. So if people aren't out there hunting cats, I will get, I'll be having a word to them. I'll be ringing them up saying, you need to get shooters out there. You need to, work out hunting programs to get, talk to people like yourself. How do you get people from the city that want to hunt out there and to do this? Because they'll do it for free, right? Like it's a sport,
Yep.
obviously.
Yep.
And we don't want to pay for it because, the carbon projects are very limited in their funding, especially to begin with. The trees start off small, so our income is small. So for the first 5 years, we're not making much money, but we have to get these projects going. We have to say that we're improving biodiversity. To improve biodiversity, for example, we have to get rid of cats. We have to get rid of feral pigs that are eating all the frogs and the native wildlife. How do we do that with no money? Well, it's talking to people like you to introduce programs, hunting programs, to connect the city to the country in that sense.
Yep.
So the two
Yep.
go
Yep.
hand in hand. Like if they don't go hand in hand, people don't know what they're doing. It is absolutely crucial to the longevity of wildlife in Australia and agriculture. We just can't do it. I really want to drill that into your audience. It's like I am so pro hunting. It's not funny. And we absolutely must do that to improve environmental conservation and regeneration across the entire world.
Yeah, it's funny you talk about feral cats. I had a guy on here from northern Queensland. He's in the feral contracting business, feral removal contracting business. And he couches feral cats like this. The whole catch, neuter, release programs are in place. He said, look, these cats aren't having sex with our native wildlife. They're murdering them.
Yeah.
So why are you removing the sexual organs? You should be removing their teeth.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't agree with those type of programs at all. I think we just need to work out a way to effectively remove them. But cats are a lot harder to hunt than pigs. You can't really go and do a helicopter shoot. I'm not sure how. I don't have the answers. Maybe you do. How to effectively remove cats, but they're bloody snaky.
No, it's a dedicated essentially thermal hunting program.
Okay. Yeah.
That's the only way to do it. It's expensive, super, super, super expensive because it's just time and labor.
Yeah. Yeah.
At night.
Yeah.
With very advanced equipment.
Okay, great. Well, thanks for that. More expenses coming my way.
Yeah. Well, Khory, look, man, I appreciate your time. I know you're a busy man. I really wanted to have this conversation. I think these are the kinds of conversations that are sort of peripheral to hunting, but they have some influence, but it's all tied to conservation, restoration of the land. And that's the kind of business that you're in. So I much appreciate you saying yes to me on a random DM through Instagram. And I appreciate your time.
No, I really loved chatting to you though, Robbie. Thank you for having me on. And as a closing note to your audience, I think that look out for those carbon projects. I think it's actually going to increase the opportunities in the hunting world. If I can get a coordinated partnership with hunting parties or organisations, that's what I aim to do. I aim to do that long term. So yeah, I really wanted to come on for that reason, to have a chat with you and to get back into that world a little bit, because I'm sort of been outside it for a long time now. So yeah, I appreciate that. And if anyone wants to reach out to me for that reason, to have a look at hunting opportunities that may be available on some of our carbon projects, let me know. Hit me up.
How would they find you, Khory?
Instagram, or look, I'm online. I've got Climate Revive is a carbon company that we run. So you can contact me through there, but Instagram, if you just, look up Khory Hancock, Khory, and then Hancock, it should come up. You'll find me, and
Perfect.
then DM me through there, and we'll have a chat.
Perfect. Appreciate you, Khory.
Thanks, Robbie.